Italians, more than any other immigrant group, were more likely to go back home again. This changed after World War One, but before that, they would plan to make their fortune, they would plan to go home again, and a lot of family did. After World War One, even families who had come and gone went back to America because enough is enough.
You did start to see, especially in the turn of the century into the 20th century, people would immigrate to Brazil. Sometimes they would spend no time there. Sometimes the ship would just stop off at the port. Other times they'd spend a couple of years in Brazil before immigrating to the United States. And so if you have someone who's coming in the 1900s, especially if you're looking at passenger lists and seeing it saying they're Portuguese, but they're coming from Brazil, that was a fairly common occurrence.
Good news for everyone. It's never been easier to find your connection to a Mayflower passenger. Of course, 2020 is the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower landing, and organizations like American Ancestors, the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, and Family Search, among other organizations, are working together, putting our resources together, and creating new databases, publications, publishing our research to make it accessible and easier for you to really find your connection.
So if you're thinking about really documenting your Mayflower ancestry, spend more time on generations 10 through 16 and 6 through 9 than you do on 1 through 5, because 1 through 5 has basically been done for you, with a few exceptions.
The stories behind migration are fascinating. It's how our ancestors came to be where they are when we found them. The ancient native DNA samples tell the story of our ancestors before we can find them in the records, before we can find them in our family stories. It tells where they came and when. It marks their pathway, and it promotes the understanding of our forebears, meaning that it gives us a perspective that we can't have from the genealogy that we can find in the history books. So I compiled the maps, 2 kinds of maps for the book. I compiled one map by haplogroup of ancient DNA, and then I compiled maps of contemporary DNA. And I love maps. I'm kind of a map junkie, and I hope you will too. This is going to be fun.
The decision to migrate clearly depends on many factors. What pushed your ancestor out of the current location, and what is pulling them to a new location? During this time period, factors such as the East Coast becoming crowded, urbanization, overpopulation, or at least the perception of overpopulation, lack of opportunities, especially for younger sons, crop failures in the area, and financial disasters all pushed people out.
The grantee index, to me, is the first place I start. It's actually when our ancestor is buying land. And you could try a grantor index as well. Grantor is when they're selling land, and they would be the seller or the grantor. And when they're buying land, they're the grantee. Now, I'm going to use an example of a mortgage that my 3rd great-grandfather got in 1842. And if I scroll down here, this is the grantee index for Suffolk County. I used from FamilySearch.org. There's the date of the property. This is my 3rd great-grandfather, Henry Poor, getting land from Charles H. Harrington via a mortgage. And this is a Church Street property that they lived.